That's Mike.
And that's Gabriel Lewis.
Gabriel Lewis is an award-winning private chef and culinary entrepreneur who showed off his fresh and finessed cooking skills by finishing in the top 7 of Masterchef Season 8. By pushing his abilities on the show, Gabe was able to earn a position under Chef Aaron Sanchez and an education in culinary arts courtesy of Gordon Ramsay. He now cooks for his company, Chef Gabe LLC, to showcase his natural talent and love for food. Be sure to check out his website and his social media for great recipes and more updates from a talented chef. Gabe, thanks for your time today.
Oh, happy to be here.
It's a true pleasure. I know just off the bat, my wife definitely cried when you got eliminated from MasterChef. So she was really excited about this one as well as we are. It's a true honor to have someone like you on our podcast. So really, thank you for the time.
Oh, it's no problem. Definitely appreciate y'all.
Yeah. So growing up in OKC, right? What was that like?
Well, it was a lot different then than it is now, which is weird to say because I'm only just turned 23. So, it's very recent history, but it was very calm, very quaint, just a really very simple upbringing. My mother, my father, I have 4 other siblings. So lots of sibling rivalry, small things, this and that, tit for tat. And funny enough, I was a very average student. I didn't make any real impact as far as, I'm doing poorly or I'm doing excellent past elementary school. It was just, I knew from a very young age that I wanted to follow food. So that's kind of where my focus was driven towards. So as far as, growing up with my education, it was just kind of, hey, I'm just going to get this going so I can start cooking, and I'm going to get this done so I can keep cooking. It's pretty much been, with me since I was a kid.
What's your first cooking memory?
First cooking memory would probably have to be in the kitchen with my mother, I think a mid-2000s Thanksgiving. And my family's always been very food-centric, starting with my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, my mother and my father's side. So that's something that just got passed on. And any Thanksgiving or Christmas, we would always have these, large gatherings and festivities and food. And I would just watch as my mother or my grandmother would prepare food. And one day I just decided to ask if I could help out. So I'm starting to mix cake batter and help prepare dressing and stuffings and gravies. And it just stuck with me.
How old were you?
I believe I was probably around 7 or 8 years old.
Wow. That's pretty cool. That you found a passion and drove that from 7, because there's not many people that, stick with that, a lot, especially as a 7-year-old. You're bouncing around, you're playing soccer, you're playing football, you're doing all these different sports because you're exploring, and to find that passion so young and stick with it is an amazing thing. It's really neat.
It was
that is really cool.
Yeah. Definitely
especially
uncommon.
To have that.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Gabe.
Oh no, you're good. Good.
I was going to say, I think it's really cool too to have that awareness at such a young age to be able to connect with that. And I'm thinking, I got into cooking within the past 5 years, I'd say, and I like it from the very technical aspect of measuring things out and getting that mise en place. I like that mechanical aspect to it. So I'm wondering, as a 7-8-year-old, what was it about cooking that drew you to it? What made you so passionate about it and so aware at such a young age that this is what I love?
Well, even at that age, I had a lot of memories that were based in food, a lot of joy would come from the food that I would eat at a young age. So for me, it was about creating that experience for other people, or being able to see the same thing that other people saw, or I could see. Is, if I would try my mother's fried chicken, it would instantly make me happy and joyous. And I'm like, it's fried chicken night. And so I wanted to be able to do that for other people.
That's really cool.
And so of the 5, where do you fall? Are you the oldest?
No, I'm actually the youngest. So we have about a 10-year age gap. So eldest being 33, me being 23. So we have 33, I believe, 29, 28, and 25.
Wow. I guess that makes in some way it could go both ways, right? Your maturity level is probably higher than the average that you were with, because you were trying to keep up with all these, up to 10 years older than you. So a 17-year-old. So that kind of makes a little sense that you're mature in that sense there. But I mean, seriously, as a 7-year-old, I still can't get past that maturity. As a 7-year-old, I would not want to hang out with myself as a 7-year-old.
Well, I had an aunt. She was like my second mother, and I spent a lot of time with her. She helped raise me, and she was already within her early to mid 70s by the time I could actually, remember. So I credit her a lot with some of my quote unquote maturity. She was really no nonsense, and even if I was, being a child, she didn't really cut anything for my benefit, or she didn't try to censor anything. So she was very upfront in your face. This is who I am. You're gonna have to accept me, and I love you. So try to work on my level.
And I'm sure the no nonsense was definitely pushed right into you. So that makes sense, though. All right. So just growing up, what was the food scene outside of your household in Oklahoma City?
Honestly, from my earlier memories, the food scene wasn't very extravagant. It was mostly just kind of Southern style home cooking, or some Midwestern classics. So chicken fried steak, onion burgers, steak potato dinner, things like that. We actually had a kind of an Asian district erupt in Oklahoma, I believe around the early to mid 2000s. And it's an entire district that spans a couple of miles of different Asian restaurants, from Vietnamese to Chinese, Japanese. And there's a large Asian superstore there that kind of helped me uncover a lot of different things as far as the cuisine went. But early on, it was very basic, and then it started to evolve very rapidly.
Interesting. And so when you broke away from cooking with your mom and family, started cooking on your own, how old were you when that started?
That was about 12 or 13. I started kind of experimenting with things, and my father actually had a stroke my first year of high school. So when I was 14 years old, he had a stroke at the beginning of the year. And my mother would spend a lot of time taking care of him. So I figured the one thing I could try to take over from her was the cooking aspect of it. So I started kind of getting into developing a palate and being able to create these different dishes and cook more so they wouldn't have to worry about it. But it worked in my favor as well.
Wow. And what were some of those dishes that you cooked?
Most of it was trying to replicate what she could do.
Okay.
So it was, some family classics: spaghetti, meatballs, fried chicken, maybe some Alfredo pasta, things like that. And then it kind of started to take a shift when I realized I really enjoyed Asian food. So I started to try to work on, different soups like pho, or trying to make some chicken lo mein, Japanese fried rice, things like that.
Okay. And that's when you started to get that relationship with the grocery store.
That started a little bit earlier. My mother, she was always an experimental cook as well. So when I was about 10 years old, I think, is when she started to try to take me to these different places. And so she was fascinated with that superstore and took me, and I became fascinated with it. I just really started to understand what I was looking at around that age.
I saw that you mentioned in some other interviews in our research that your mother was very influential in your cooking, and that she cooked very diverse dishes, and you phrased it that she traveled through food. It sounds a lot like what you're describing right now, and I had a question based off of that information, which was, what were some specific dishes that left a very visceral impact on you and made you sort of branch out and want to take the reins a little bit more on your own? Or which ones sort of like transport you back, I think, to that scene in Ratatouille, that iconic scene where the critic takes a bite of the ratatouille and gets flashed back to his childhood. Do you have any dishes like that do something like that for you?
Honestly, my mother would make this, she would do kind of like this sweet and sour pork. And she made this almost, I think, shrimp nigiri. And
Oh, yeah.
she was playing around with it. She was experimenting. It wasn't anything that was just set in stone. And I came home one day and she's like, "Hey, try this. And I took a bite, and I will never forget it because I always asked her to make it, and she would never make it again. So she had this bad habit when she would experiment with something and she'd get it just to where she would want it, she would never make it again. So those two come to mind, but she also made this kind of Indian style, like Southern curry. And it was out of nowhere. It was just from random things we had in the pantry. And I looked and I said, hey, I don't see anything to eat. She's like, all right, give me an hour. And she fed 5 people off of what I saw was nothing. And it was just mind blowing.
That's a talent. That's a true talent to have. I mean, I fall on the, especially in modern day, I fall on the wayside. If I don't see anything, it's like I don't have that creativity. I just go, okay, Uber Eats, let's just do this, you know. But I mean, that's something that I can see in your capabilities, and moving into your next chapter of life, that probably brought a huge skill that got you to the point on Masterchef, because you saw your mom be able to go into a pantry and just in a blink of an eye grab a bunch of items and make a dish. And I'm sure cooking under pressure later on, you maybe honed in on that.
Oh, most definitely. We used to spend a lot of time together watching like Iron Chef America and Chopped, and those are based in mystery ingredients or mystery basket items. So that coupled with what she would be able to do kind of inspired me to try to do the same thing. So I would get in the kitchen after school and, you know, look in the freezer, look in the fridge, see what I could find, or go to a grocery store and try to pick up one of the more unfamiliar items that, you know, I may or may not have crossed in the past, and just pick it up and see what I could do with it. So it's like one of the things I tell young chefs or young home cooks or anybody that reaches out to me via social media, and they say, how do I get into cooking, or how do I try to figure out how do I, you know, utilize this ingredient? And I tell them, I say, well, start with something as basic as a carrot and see how many different ways you can make it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing advice, you know, because I would imagine there's hundreds of ways to make a carrot. Maybe not hundreds, but, you know, probably 100.
You would be surprised.
Yeah. This is you're once again, I have no food. Like my wife is a good cook. Drew is a good cook. So I've been spoiled by living with 2 great cooks. I'm terrible. So I look at a carrot, I'm like, okay, this is pretty good as it is. I don't know what to do. I would be, but that's great advice too, because you can take anything. It doesn't need to be so complex, but there's so many ways to prepare something, and so many it creates that creativity gene that you need. Especially to be a chef outside of the 9-to-5 restaurant chef world, where if you want to go and pursue a culinary career, you have to have that ability. And so did you ever try those kind of experiments yourself, where you would take an ingredient and make it 100 ways?
Oh, most definitely. A lot of it came from just trying to figure out and challenge myself and say, hey, I need to get outside of this comfort zone, because I'm too used to taking a carrot and glazing it. So I need to figure out, what else can I do with this? Can I make it into a soup? Can I make a broth out of it? Can I, you know, use it in marinades? Can I roast this? Can I make it into a dessert? So it was a way to challenge thought. And I know there was some other chef that advised something very similar, and was just, you know, hey, take something and run with it. And the carrot or the potato are really great ingredients to do that with, because they have so many different methods of preparation, especially with potatoes. Who doesn't love a really good potato? So absolutely. That's something that I started doing probably around 14, 15 years old.
And of the 100 times you made it, how many of them didn't work? And how much learning do you get from those poorly executed dishes?
I would say over half didn't, and those were the best lessons.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the food that I had that sort of insight with, that you were talking about, with watching your mom take something from the pantry and be able to feed 5 people with it, or finding something very basic and finding so much creativity and potential within that. For me, that was fresh pasta. When I started making pasta for the first time, like watching from the beginning, just a few eggs and a little bit of flour can turn into so many different things. And I found that so cool, and such a cool insight into, just how food is really transforming simple things into something so much more than that, something you're providing for other people.
Oh yeah, and pasta is it's one of those blank canvases. So when you have just a sheet of pasta or your rudimentary pasta dough, you could say, hey, I'm going to take some chopped spinach and we're going to blend this and we're going to make this into a spinach pasta. We can make a cayenne pasta. We can make a chipotle pasta. Like there's so many different things you can do with that. That's a great example because you can do a lot more, I think, with pasta than maybe what you could do with just a single carrot. So that's a great
not even talking
great
about
representation of that.
Too.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
That's a whole nother side. Like
oh yeah,
spin it and shit. Yeah.
There are thousands of pasta shapes.
And those are just the ones that we know about. Like if you travel to Italy, there's every city and every person has their own pasta. And so that's something I want to talk about is Drew mentioned that your mother would travel through food. And I think that's a really interesting kind of quote. And so did you guys do a lot of traveling outside of your local area when you were a child, or was it mainly using what she could find at this grocery store or at the standard grocery store to, take you out of your current area?
Mostly it was localized. Like I said, I was family, 5 kids. So, they have to make sure that basic necessities are taken care of. And whatever comes after that is, very rare. So a lot of it would be going to grocery stores or, maybe watching the Food Network or watching Andrew Zimmern on the Travel Channel and seeing his exploits and seeing some of the dishes that the local cooks would make and being inspired by that. She would go to a grocery store or an ethnic market or try to source those ingredients and then try to replicate those flavors. So my mother was a very observant individual. So it wouldn't be much for her to, look at a recipe or watch a video or, watch a chef make something and they talk about the notes that should come from the food and her being able to replicate that. It wouldn't be much trial and error.
Wow. That's like I said, she sounds like an amazingly talented woman. And I can see a lot of that when I watch you cook. So it's a really cool thing. I think she'd be really proud. So then you're growing up, right? You're going down a culinary exploration on your own at home, and you begin to work in fast food. What is that shift from your palate seems to be so mature, and then you go to probably the most immature and processed side of the food industry? Why did you make that choice?
So most of it was understanding what my work ethic was. So I knew from a young age I wanted to go into food, but my first job I wasn't going to land as a line cook. So I went to work with my sisters. My sister worked at Panera Bread at the time. So I went to go work with her. And I'm not going to lie, I was a very poor employee. I was, kind of like, well, I'm going to be here for 6 months and I'm out of here. And it took an attitude shift. So I sat down with my dad and my dad said, you need to understand that either you're going to work like you work for yourself or don't work here, regardless if it's a corporation or not, or if they, are fast food or fast casual, they're not up to the standard you want to work in. You have to understand where to start and you have to start it right. That makes sense to me. So about that 6-month period, I kind of flipped and I became the quote unquote model employee and try to work my way up the ladder and understanding more so the business side of a franchise than just focusing on the food. So I would see what their practices were as far as their food safety, what their suppliers were, what their procedures were, how they would treat frozen or fresh food, frozen or fresh produce. So it was more educating myself on how a system would work and how I work in the system.
Wow. I mean, that and I would say that's probably for your journey. Panera Bread was some kind of like you hit the right location to be at, because they're a little bit of that fast casual, like you're saying, and they at least get fresh produce. I've never worked at a McDonald's. I don't necessarily see McDonald's getting a ton of fresh produce from maybe a local source. So you got a little bit of an entry into that, and it is always good to learn from a machine like Panera, right? Or a big, top 5 business, and that's interesting. So what were some lessons that you took that you're using today?
One of them was understanding that your food temperature and safety of your product is penultimate. Like, you cannot sacrifice quality for anything. So, unfortunately, I had some lackluster upper management. My direct management was fine, but as far as management that wasn't in the store daily, they cared about were the books appearing to be correct and numbers. So I learned from them what not to do as well as what to do. So they would tell us, oh, well, you just need to make sure it's filled out. You need to make sure it's this. And that is a definite no-no. You do not forge a temperature log, because if somebody does get sick from improper food handling and they decide, hey, you guys were to blame, and they're like, no, I didn't. It's like, okay, well, whoever perjured themselves is now liable.
Yeah, absolutely. And either way, you don't want to mess with someone like that. That's just an immoral thing. And I'm glad that you stood up to something like that too. It just shows to the maturity of who you were.
Yeah. Well, if you ask my former area manager, it was arrogance.
Arrogance. Okay.
Yeah, I came in on a shift one day and we had no hot water. Nobody knew how long the hot water had been out. And you cannot run a restaurant without hot water. You'll be shut down by your local health department. Mm-hmm. So I called and I asked, and I said, well, what are we doing about it? We can't wash dishes, blah, blah, blah. We can't wash our hands properly. The chemicals aren't just going to do the job. And I was told, a direct quote was, you are a associate. I don't have to listen to you. If you don't like the way I run my restaurants, leave.
Wow.
So, right. So I said, okay, put down the phone, left, called the health department, and they were closed within an hour. So there was, so there's certain things that that system definitely taught me. But the most important thing was, make sure that your customers' safety is your number one priority.
Yeah, it seems like by this point in your life, both with that mentality shift and just from what you've told us, that you've been very observant, and it seems like that maybe shifted, into taking some leadership and standing up for your own beliefs and what you were trying to do for yourself. At what point did that start getting focused on getting into Masterchef or cooking competitions, where you're actually putting yourself out there and not just observing anymore, but being an active participant in these types of competitions?
Well, it was something I always wanted to do, but I didn't know how to start it, because when you go through these applications, like, for example, the Chopped application asks for your work history and what restaurant you work in. And the fact that I was working in a fast casual franchise, that was very discouraging for me as far as the application point. So I went ahead with the application, didn't get any feedback, so I just left it alone. But one day my sister sent me a text message and said, hey, Gabe, I don't know if this is real. You need to check this out. And MasterChef was hosting open calls in Oklahoma, and Wow. They never have. So they've never done an open casting call in Oklahoma City. So I said, this can't be real. So I go to the Fox.com website and check it out. And sure enough, it's authentic. So that's kind of what made that tone shift. That's what made that actual shift into the culinary competitions. So from Panera, I had shifted over literally next door to Chipotle. And while I was there, that's when that happened. So I filled out the application, and I think about within 2.5 weeks, I was at the open call audition with my food. So.
And I might get this wrong, but from what my research told me, you won an entry with a Japanese style crispy pork belly and jasmine rice. Is that correct?
That's right. I got up very early in the morning, was braising this pork belly, and then trying to make sure the skin gets crispy, making sure the spice blends were right. And I didn't know how the audition process would go, but they just said, bring your best dish, and you won't have to wait to heat it up. You won't have to wait to plate it. So bring everything that you can think of. Okay. Wow. So luckily, my audition site was only about 15 minutes away from where I was staying. So hightailed it down there and got up there. They stick a number on you, and they have you wait in line. You go in groups, and I went into this room and just plated everything. And the judges at the time came around to taste my food, and they had plasticware, and I was freaking out. I'm like, who cuts pork with plastic? It's like, I'm probably not going to make it, because I don't know if it's that tender. And sure enough, the judge is talking to me, and he starts cutting into my pork belly, and he cuts it with a plastic knife. And I was so relieved. So I could see how tender it was, and I could hear how crispy the skin was. So I was super excited. I'm like, maybe I'll make it through. And lo and behold, they said, okay, here's your information. Go in that room. And I go in the next room and say, congratulations. You guys are the ones that made the next process. And it's kind of history from there.
Well,
That's awesome.
I guess if you can cut, that's a great test for them to have. If you can cut pork belly with a plastic knife, it's probably pretty good.
I'm curious about that dish too, because it was so interesting hearing you talk about the local markets and your mom taking you to those places, especially with the outcropping of a more Asian influence in the culinary scene in Oklahoma City. How'd you pick that dish? How many times did you practice cooking it? Why'd you pick that one of all things?
I picked that one because they asked to bring your best dish and the one that most represents who you are. So at that time, that was the dish that, my mother loved, my father loved, my family seemed to love the most. And it was something that I knew was technically difficult in certain ways,
Absolutely.
but it also best represented what I could do at the time. So it was kind of the best dish I could really put out.
So how did you heat it up? You just said you had to bring all the tools.
Yeah, I didn't. I had it foil wrapped.
Okay.
I had the bottom foil wrapped, and then I left the skin on top uncovered so it didn't steam. It was a very convoluted packaging.
But it worked. Hey, man, it worked.
That it did.
So you go into that room. You're picked to move on. What's the next step?
From there, they just kind of sent us on our way and said, okay, we'll be in touch. And so they have any point in time to kind of cut you. So I was gracious enough to get an email, I think a week or two later, that kind of sent me through the paperwork process. And then I started taking down the paperwork, and they tell you at every point in time, it's like at any point we could decide not to select you. So if you keep getting emails, great. If you don't get an email or you get an unfortunately, you're done. So I kept getting emails. They asked me to do a psych evaluation and sent me to Texas. And I went to Texas and filled all that out and came back up here and just kept going through the process. And they said, well, we'll be able to tell you whether or not you're going to Los Angeles July 15th. My birthday was on the 14th. So I was like, man, I have to be nervous my whole birthday. Now, mind you, I'm 18 years old at the time. I'm turning 19 that birthday. So I'm with my brother for most of the day, July 13th, the day before my birthday, and I get an email. And I'm like, what is this? And I open it, and it's that email, and it says, congratulations, you're going to Los Angeles. So instead of spending the whole day anxious, I got to spend the whole day celebrating.
Oh, that's awesome.
That is the best birthday gift I would probably imagine to this date.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
That's awesome. And happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you.
We're filming this on the 21st, so 7 days now, 20 into 23. That is awesome. So once you get that email, what's the next step from there?
Just getting flown out, and it's the auditions. So you get there, you get set up, they tell you to get ready. And from there, what you see on TV is pretty much it. So going into the auditions was intense because they bring you into the courtyard and you have to watch the pairing. So you know what group you're in, you just don't know who you're going against. So they said, hey, you're going to be doing this battle. And I'm like, okay, so your position is coming up. You're probably going on at about 4:30 or 5 o'clock or whatever they say. And I say, okay. And so I get up, they call me up, and they have me getting against 3 other people. And I'm looking, I'm like, oh, crap. So I get up, and I'm getting psyched up. My parents are psyching me up, and I don't know what to expect. And I go into this MasterChef kitchen, and they're literally sitting there with like lights coming in on them, and there's all kinds of just ambiance, and it's really intimidating. And it's literally like walking up to an execution. Like, oh no. So super, super nervous. And I've never been in any way, shape, or form that close to a celebrity chef of any caliber, let alone Gordon Ramsay, Aaron Sanchez, and Christina Tosi. Yeah. So I was freaking out internally. Then I find that I'm doing tacos. And I'm not only doing tacos, I'm doing tacos and presenting them to Aaron Sanchez. So I've watched on Food Network for no telling how long. So I'm already freaking out. And I'm thinking, wow, this is the new judge. I know who he is. He probably has a point to prove. I might be crucified. This is terrifying. And so they tell us to go, and I start making my tacos. And I'm talking to Aaron Sanchez. He's kind of, hitting me with, Gabriel, so what are you making? And talking to me a little bit. And then Chef Ramsay starts talking, and I'm freaking out because I've idolized him since I was a kid. So I'm super, super nervous. And he said, so what helps inspire you? And I told him, I was like, it's my mother, but also I've been watching you since I was a kid. And he was like, been watching me since you were a kid. I'm sure I'm older than you. And so he's messing with me to try to get me to stop being so nervous. And then they kind of give me pay me some small compliments while I'm cooking. So I get really kind of hyped up off of that and kind of just go through the dish. And then we get to the judging table, judging time. And Aaron Sanchez gets to my tacos. And I put limes on the side of the tacos. And he said, I'm not even going to use that. Now, let me tell you why. And I'm freaking out because I'm like, oh, I messed up. And he says, I watched how you played it, how you seasoned, and what you put on it. And you were so attentive that I don't want to compromise the flavors that you already built. So I'm going to try your taco without the limes. And I was like, okay. And so he tries them, and they aired, obviously, what he was saying about them. And it was very, very encouraging. So I'm kind of just feeling some of the pressure come off my shoulders, but I'm still really, really nervous. And so I get my apron, and they send me out of the kitchen. And I come across the lead wrangler, and the wrangler is one of the people that helps us get from A to B. And he said, look, man, I told you beforehand, don't be nervous, just be you. You didn't listen. You were still nervous, but you were still you. So he said, man, I'm proud of you. And he said, you can show your apron off however you want to when you go through these doors. So they're like, yeah, you can hide it. You can act like you didn't get it, whatever you want to do. So it's not scripted. So people do the whole, oh, I didn't get it. I got it. That's actually them. And so I said, okay, I might do something like that. And I didn't. So they didn't even show this, but as soon as the doors came open, I jumped out and I'm like super excited. And my parents are super excited. And I jumped down all the steps. Like I didn't try to walk down the steps, I jumped down the steps. And was super excited about it. So yeah, it's a long process as far as the paperwork goes, but when they say it's the green light, they're ready to go.
That's really cool. I was actually going to ask you about a particular recipe that you put on your blog, on your website recently for fish tacos, because they were described as life-changing for you, the recipe that changed your life and sparked your career. I was going to ask about that, but I think we got our answer on why they're so life-changing.
Yeah.
That was one of the most requested things I think I've ever had to type up was, can you just make your tacos? Okay.
And those donuts look pretty good too.
Oh yeah, that was the first time I ever made donuts, and I that's why I think Gordon Ramsay said it's very ballsy of you to try to make donuts in an hour or 45 minutes, and well, got to do something.
I think that's a good adjective to describe your work ethic and your attitude for sure. And I'm also wondering, as a chef, how were you feeling going into this competition? One, without formal training, knowing that you might be competing against other people with formal training. And number two, how did you feel going into an unfamiliar kitchen? I'm assuming that maybe you didn't get the chance to try out the tools and the appliances that you were using while you were cooking on the show. How did you feel, or how did you deal with the nervousness of being in an unfamiliar environment like that?
Well, as far as my competitors went, we kind of all had an agreement that, you know what, this is a competition. Obviously, we're all going to be eliminated at some point except for one person. So best of luck. Do what you can and try to hold no hard feelings. For me personally, one of the main reasons I went into the competition was to see where I was at as far as a cook, because everybody in your circle can tell you're a great cook. But if you step outside of that, somebody could point out your flaws and say, hey, you're not good. So I needed that to have validation as to whether or not I was on the right path, whether or not my food was actually, decent or not, or if I'm just playing myself and my circle is just kind of inflating, compliments. So for me, that was kind of the way I dealt with it was, this is the situation you put yourself in. This is why you're here. So don't let the nerves take over. I'm like, okay, fair enough. And I had a notebook that I would write in, and I would write certain encouraging things that my dad said. So my dad has always kind of pushed us to be very self-motivating. So he'd always tell us, it's like, hey, there's only one you. There's only one person that can do what you do. Nobody else can do what you do. So go pull a you. I'm like, all right, well, that's fair. So I would kind of write those down. It almost became like a mantra, and would write those down. And that's kind of how I would psych myself up for it. But as far as being in an unfamiliar kitchen, that was just part of the territory. So no, I didn't have any opportunity to team the Masterchef kitchen. I didn't have a chance to, work with unfamiliar equipment unless I was using it while I was cooking. So it was kind of just, a lot of observation while I'm walking down and saying, okay, might be where this is. This might be where this is. This might be where this is. What do I want to try to use? So it was a lot of thoughts going around, but it was just kind of, most of it, you just had to go for it. So I hate the expression, but I don't. It's, there's nothing to it but to do it. So
yeah,
it seems very true for the kitchen itself, right?
Oh, most definitely.
And before you knew you were going to be given the opportunity going into it. Did they tell you that you're going to be making tacos before you went? They
gave me they told me, they said, hey, the dish that you're going to be grouped in is tacos.
Okay.
And I said, okay. And then I didn't know who I was going against. I didn't know what anybody was making. I didn't know what ingredients would be available. And I just kind of had to go in with whatever idea I had. So the taco recipe that I ended up doing was one that I experimented with when I was at home like a year ago. And so a year prior to me actually doing the dish, I was working on a dish in the summertime, making some blackened fish tacos, but I used swine instead of tilapia. And I just kind of ran with it. And that dish that I actually presented was probably about 10 to 15 times better than the one I made at home. So I was super excited about it because this dish had, I think, 3 different toppings and the protein and the tortilla. So I had 5 different elements to create, and it was just, moving and moving and moving. So I didn't know how it would come out, but I decided to give it my best shot.
Did you ever practice at home going into it, like cooking under time? Did you ever put yourself on a clock? Okay. So you knew, I mean, obviously you were watching shows like Chopped. You knew what that pressure would do to you. So you practiced that.
Oh yeah. And I've been a massive Masterchef fan since the beginning. So I've watched almost every episode since the beginning of the show back in 2010. So I knew that, hey, there's twists, there's turns, there are things that you may not be comfortable making or baking. So you need to get to it. So I'm not gonna lie, I spent probably 2/3 of the time trying to bake cakes. That was most of the experimentation was desserts and cakes. But I did a couple of things like the tacos. I would try to make a burger a little bit different or challenge myself with different proteins, some that are leaner, some that are fattier, and just see what I could do within 30 to 45 minutes.
That's really smart. I mean, and it's obvious that you got to where you were because you were so prepared for it, mentally and physically, in the sense of having done some of those items. And so you were also the youngest person on that season, correct?
After I think 2 episodes, there was a person younger, Paige. She was a year younger than I was.
Oh, okay. And so being one of the younger 2, were you treated differently? Was there anything different about you? Did you feel different?
I felt like I might be outclassed. So I didn't know, because there was people anywhere ranging from low end 21, 22, above me, to mid 50s. So in my mind, I'm thinking there's decades of experience here. Hopefully I can measure up. But I can't say that I was treated very differently. There was people that definitely underestimated, but they never tried to belittle or make me feel insignificant or anything like that. It was a real camaraderie with the contestants that I was with, and they're still like a second family to me. So, and I think that plays a big part into it, is that there was a lot of mutual respect going on, as far as just, hey, I know you're young, but you're here for a reason. So
yeah. I mean, you clearly showed that you deserve to be there in the cutting process to get there. Do you guys all stay in the same house?
Hotel, yeah.
Hotel, okay. Do they another question that's random? Do they provide you clothing? Because almost on all these TV shows, there's no labels, right? You can't wear like a Nike T-shirt. So do they provide you clothing, or do they tell you come prepared with clothing that has no labels or specifications on it?
Yeah, they give us kind of a do and don't list. So it's
Okay.
like, hey, you can wear this, but don't wear these because this is, a brand that we don't have a license to, show on our show and things like that, or we don't have the permissions. So even when I had to do my, like we had the videos for when they were first introduced, they had video footage that my sister had filmed with me walking in and out of a Chipotle and things like that. And I had to go through several different managers and higher ups and HR representatives just to get the consent for them to show this, during the Masterchef openings. So it's a lot to try to wrangle in if you don't give people a do's and don'ts. So they just kind of said, yeah, bring this, bring that. Don't wear this, don't wear that.
Oh, interesting.
It sounds like this became totally a full-time job, I would imagine, from that green light and the auditions and getting the go-ahead. What was your dedication level like? Was it like a full-time job? And how long did that experience last with your career on MasterChef?
It was, I would say I was more committed to it than I was my job at the time, because I left the job. I told them, I said, hey, I got to leave. I'm taking a hiatus. If you want to fire me, that's okay, but I can't tell you why. I told my general manager, I said, hey, I'm actually leaving to film this show. Don't say anything. They said, if you need to tell your employer, just make sure your employer shuts up. So I told my employer, and she was actually a good friend at the time. She said, hey, don't worry about it. Do your job's here when you get back if you want it. So when I left, I had nothing to distract me. And I didn't have my phone or any kind of technology like that. So it was just complete focus on the main objective. So I spent most of my free time either with my competitors and talking to them about food and kind of gauging where other people's minds were, to having to study some cookbooks that I brought, write down recipes that I knew in my head, or think about some different plating ideas, writing sketches down in another notebook I had. So it was definitely like a full-time job. I spent all of my energy and time focused on the next thing coming, because it's really, you can't anticipate. You could try and you can say, okay, based on our track record, we haven't done what, but even doing that and watching the show for all of the 7 seasons leading up to mine, there's no way that I could have guessed what would come next in the next challenge. So it was super stressful.
Yeah.
But I spent all of my time just dedicated and focused on improving my cooking ability. And the entire process ended up lasting about 2.5 months. So I was away from family and friends, isolated with just the people that I was competing against for that entire time. And it was still an amazing experience, but it was incredibly stressful.
Yeah, that's a quick amount of time too for all of that. That must have felt like a whirlwind.
Yep, it was 6 days a week too, so it was very hot and heavy. Yeah.
And you're just they're doing something every day, all day. And I guess filming takes, for us as a viewer, it's 45 minutes. But the filming of that probably takes at least a day, maybe more.
Yeah, most definitely, depending on the challenge. So there'll be, we may have a full episode in a day. We may have a full episode in 2 days.
Wow.
We don't know. So it was just super intense. And my aesthetic I was known for my kind of plain, younger aesthetic, with having the t-shirts, the jeans, and Chuck Taylors. If anyone would have told me how much standing I would be doing, I would have picked a more supportive shoe. Because you're literally at top 20, you're standing there until everybody's dishes have been tasted by all 3 judges.
Oh my goodness.
You're going through, if you're number 20, you're going through 59 other criticisms of food before you get your food tasted.
That, yeah, you would have gotten, I guess that you would have gotten the classic shoes of a cook, right? Something that, like I don't know, they wear like an orthopedic Croc looking shoe.
Yeah, I kind of told them, because they said, yeah, we're going to organize some grocery trips and whatever. If you guys need to go get things, I said, I need insoles like now.
Yeah.
I need some supports.
And
Get
so
something a 7-year-old woman would want.
Yeah, there you go. So I mentioned it a little bit in our intro, but at the end of that 2.5 months, that whirlwind experience on the show, you ended up in the top 7, and you took away some pretty cool things from the show. For our listeners, what did you take away from the show?
So upon my elimination, I was granted culinary school free of charge by Gordon Ramsay, which was a amazing blessing. I can't even put that into words, really. And then after that, I was propositioned with a job from Chef Aaron Sanchez down in New Orleans.
That is very cool. I wanted to ask specifically about your experience with the culinary school, because something that stood out to me with your placement in the show and your competition and your achievement of getting in the top 7 was that this is coming from a sort of natural raw talent, and Gordon Ramsay praises you for your raw talent in the show. I'm curious how you've noticed your raw talent, your natural skills changing, becoming more honed, becoming a little bit better, more focused after having gone through the formal training that you didn't have up until that point.
Well, let's take the moment I leave MasterChef. It was, okay, I'm unsure about this, but my instincts are telling me maybe this will work. And from that going through training to now, it's, okay, I know what this protein may or may not need. I know what this vegetable cannot or can take. I know what proper techniques to use and not use on this. So I have about 25 different ideas that I can put together on this one dish here, and it's no sweat. So it went from just being instinct to instinct and knowledge. So it's just using my knowledge more than my instincts. So it's definitely very different, but it's a lot more. I don't really know how to explain it. It's a lot easier and it's a lot better because I can be more creative. I can, focus on the presentation a lot more. I can focus on being more risky with my flavor profiles, and I'm not as afraid to take risk.
Well, there's only the reward of getting, working with a culinary professional to teach you some of those. You're not going to get eliminated from culinary school, right? And the dream doesn't end. You're just going to work with someone and they might tell you the science behind why that was wrong or why these two items don't go together from a, educational side. So one question about culinary school, actually two. So why'd you choose where you went? Because you could have gone anywhere. You could have gone to New York City. You could have gone to Miami. You chose Denver. And then when you arrive at culinary school, what is it like being, mildly famous going in? I would say more than mildly famous going into a culinary school of your choice.
Well, I chose Denver because when I was in high school, there was a lot of chatter, a lot of talk about Johnson Wales University. They were notorious for their culinary programs and the chefs that they birthed from it. So they had, celebrity chefs from Emeril Lagasse to Aaron Sanchez, so on and so forth. So I already knew that some of the chefs that I had grown to admire had their knowledge and foundation in Johnson and Wales kitchens. So even Graham Elliott, who was the judge on the show for 5 or 6 seasons, had graduated from Johnson and Wales. So that was ingrained in my mind and said, okay, check their curriculum. So I checked their curriculum across, a couple of different sites, and I kind of compared them to some of the other curriculum offerings from different culinary schools, and they seemed to be the best fit. And, their equipments and everything seemed to be more up to date as far as what might be in new commercial kitchens versus some of the other culinary schools. And as far as arriving as a quote unquote celebrity-ish, I didn't let people know. So a lot of people didn't know. So when I first went, I actually went before my season aired.
Okay.
So I said, nobody knew. So I arrived in the middle of the year. It was the spring semester. So it was close to the end of the year. It's 3/4 of the way through. And they rotate in groups. So this group has already been together for maybe half a year or more. And I just kind of popped myself in there. So they're like, okay, who is this guy? And I'm not going to lie, I did play dumb a lot of the time. So I'm like, hey, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. And then they're like, oh, you did that really nice. Have you done it before? I'm like, I did it once. So like we had a French or rack of lamb in a class, and I finished it pretty quickly. And I was like, yeah, I've done it once before. And nobody knew exactly what that meant. So I told my class at the end of the semester, I said, hey, this is who I am. This is coming up. And of course I couldn't tell them how I was at Johnson Wales, but I said, hey, I'm going to be on this show. Check it out. And so when I came back that fall, that's when that kind of
celebrity feel came in.
Yeah. Cause then I came and I didn't know they're antisocial when I went because I didn't want the potential of compromising the integrity of the show. So I didn't speak to very many people. And so when I came back in the fall semester, I started to talk to people a little bit more. Some of my older people that I talked to in my former rotation that previous semester. And I had random people that were just, hey, Gabe, I don't know you. And so that was more of the surprise, was that I had so many people that I had no knowledge of that knew me and knew who I was and followed my social media. And it was just really weird. It got to the point where I had instructors that knew who I was. It's like, oh, I know who you are. You're that Ramsey kid, right? Oh, okay.
So when you had gone back in the fall, had the season ended?
No. Oh, funny enough, the day that I went back, the day that classes started, my elimination episode was 2 days after classes started. So anybody that was watching the show, did not know that when I was eliminated, I had it was just a crazy experience, not just being there in person at Johnson & Wales, but my social media was just insane. So I forgot that my episode was airing because I didn't really have a way to watch it. I didn't have basic cable in my dorm room, and I couldn't watch it on my phone. I didn't have the apps for it. So, okay, well, I'm just gonna see what the reaction is, and then I'll watch it on Hulu or whatever service is gonna have it. And people were so aggressively negative when I got eliminated, and I'm like, whoa. And then within 30 seconds, the entire tweets just flipped. And so it went from, I can't believe you got eliminated, I'm so mad, you could have did better, I'm ashamed of you, blah, 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 to, I love you, I'm so happy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just so confused. And so it was a real wild ride. And then I go to class the next day and people are like, dude, really? Like, oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yep, that's me.
Yeah. So then people kind of started, there was a little bit of different treatment in certain areas, but I made it very clear, like, hey, I'm here to learn. I'm sitting here next to you. So obviously, in my mind, we're on the same level. Like, we're in the same place right here. So let's just, put this show stuff to the side and let's learn. So that's kind of where I was about it.
And now culinary school is over and you've moved into the professional side of your life, right? Why did you choose to go into the catering and private chef side of the business rather than following what I guess can be called the traditional restaurant route, which would be, kind of what you had alluded to in the beginning, being a line chef and working your way up to becoming a head chef of a restaurant? Or at that point, I mean, you probably could have reached out to one of the major restaurant groups or individuals who own them and gotten sponsored to start your own restaurant.
Well, for me, one thing that I've always kind of believed is that catering and, being a line cook, like it's two sides to the same coin. You're still cooking, you're still serving guests, you're still expressing your art. The difference with being a line cook or trying to own a restaurant or taking somebody's investment and starting a restaurant is the risk involved and the cost. So even going through culinary school, you're still not going to understand all the operating costs and expenses of a restaurant until you fully work in one. So for me, it was understanding food costs, understanding my overhead and labor, whatever that may be, and understanding how to develop menus without having that same pressure. So when you start catering, you can, get your LLCs, make sure your licenses are okay, and rent a commercial kitchen and then start catering from that commercial kitchen. And you can rent all the other equipment you may need to set up on site. So you don't have to invest heavily, thousands upon thousands or tens upon thousands of dollars into your equipment, your bit hoods, and your fire suppression and all of that, while still being able to learn all the same lessons. So that's kind of why I went into and the private chefing just allows me the creative freedom. So catering handcuffed with people's requests or allergies, so on and so forth. When you're a private chef, you can say, hey, these are my meal offerings. Do you like these? And I'm like, yeah. And I said, okay, cool. I'll cook them for you. And I can do, a small, maybe 10-person, 5-course meal and still make decent money. So that's kind of where I went with that. Now, that's just where I am now. It's still part of my plan to go into the rest. Ultimately, that's my goal. But I feel like this is the low cost education.
It's funny that you kind of mention it being low cost and lower pressure, because things change and the global situation changed and there are a whole lot of new pressures and restrictions.
Yeah.
How are you
Yep.
pushing yourself and your abilities with these unforeseen pressures and restrictions?
I would be lying if I said that it did not take me, kind of just turn me, a complete 180, and I just was looking in an opposite direction. I didn't know what to do. I literally had, I think, about $5,600 evaporate a day, and I was completely shocked because there were certain things that I was working on, certain menus and small events and events with other brands and collaborations that I was trying to put together that completely fell apart. And being in that kind of unknown is very scary. So I didn't know how to pivot. And what I started to do is just kind of fall into my social media and talk to people and just embrace my followers. And that's kind of where my therapy was, and kind of trying to clear my head that way. And it became clear that people wanted to see things like online cooking classes, or wanted recipes they can make at home. And so I started investing my time there. And from there, I just started to think, okay, what if I do contactless delivery? So I started doing meal offerings, small, menu offerings and things like that. And I would do contactless delivery and deliver to people's doorsteps, and then send them a message when the entrees or whatever had arrived, so that they have their hot, fresh food. People are still being able to eat. I'm still being able to eat, without us having to come in contact with each other. So it was an interesting way to pivot, but food is about evolution. And if you don't evolve, you die. So that was a forced evolution. So there's a positive to it, but it's it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. And just the timing of that, I mean, it's sort of a blessing in disguise that you did go into the private cooking industry versus the restaurant industry right away. I'm sure that certainly paid off with improving your abilities in that sense and giving you a different perspective on gaining more skills in the home and the private sector.
Most definitely. Because if you're directly out of culinary school and somebody says, hey, I want to fund a restaurant for you, and you have not, spent that time working for years in a restaurant, you don't know how to put out small fires. You don't know how to make sure your food costs stay between 22 and 28%. You don't understand that those margins are as important as they are, because you are kind of playing fast and loose with someone else's money. And you don't understand how to forecast, okay, I'm expecting 100 heads tonight. I'm expecting 150 people. I'm expecting 200 people foot traffic today. You don't understand how to gauge that, or how to how to read your analytics, or how to even have analytics. So you run a lot of risk of falling and not being able to pick yourself back up, or not being able to really hone in on your craft. So to me, it feels like a plateau. So if I don't have that same experience, I can't say, okay, well, I've got all this part, the basics under control, so I can still focus on my food and project upward. It's, okay, I have to learn this right here. I can't focus on my food. So whatever my skill level is right now, I've studied my own growth. And now I'm doing this, and I'm trying to raise the bar, and I'm not just going straight up when this other, I have a good foundation. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me, honestly.
I mean, that's unbelievably astute of you to know all of that too. And like Drew said, now you don't have any operating costs of like owning a rental restaurant and employees, and you can kind of farm that out as needed. That's a great way to learn. I'm shocked at how simple that sounds when you say it, but how brilliant it really is, because so many kids, I feel like, or not kids, they're full-on adults, right? So many people graduate culinary school and they want to do that route. They want to get their own restaurant, and that's the goal, where your goal is still there, but you're just going out on the other side of the coin. So today, you're currently using your blog and your Instagram to promote yourself. Obviously, our podcast is oriented towards the YouTube focus. And have you ever thought about using that medium to help increase your awareness, or teach, or share those recipes through a visual aid?
I definitely have, and it's something that it's part of the projections for me. It's part of where I want to be and where I want to go with things. As far as the media goes, it's not my strongest. It's not my strong suit. Like I can photograph plates. You know, I can capture what I see, but I cannot really develop video and edit that way. So my sister is typically my photographer, my media manager, things like that. She usually provides most of the media for my social media content. And she's also a human. She has her own job. You know, she's a professional photographer. So she actually works for a very large company in Oklahoma City. And I can't afford her time, or I can't use her the way that I'd like to be able to create content that regularly. So I want to be able to create regular content if I'm going to be using multiple channels of distribution. So for YouTube, that's something I'm looking kind of down the line at, but right now it's just not a platform that I can, you know, actually use the same way I can Instagram.
Yeah, much easier. It's a quicker turnover, right? Where the longer period of creating a video for that. But I think there's a misnomer, and I was watching a video last night on increasing your following on YouTube and trying to grow our channel, right? We're always trying to learn in that sense. And I think something that would be really cool for you is you don't have to have 1,700 videos over 10 years to become a 1 million subscriber channel. It's really about putting out the right content 1 or 2 or 5 times on a cadence of maybe monthly. And I think you're going about it the right way. There's an obvious need in the culinary world for someone like you, where I think there's so many people who have gotten out in the culinary YouTube sense that might not have the background that you do. So it'll be very interesting to watch your channel grow and to see that change come. But right now, what are you using your blog for? It's just mainly for your medium to put the recipes on?
Mostly, yeah. So it's predominantly just my recipes and the kind of the background for them. So I want to just provide some seasonal recipes for people to be able to create at home, and also kind of a foundation so people can understand some of the stuff that I cook. And it's kind of somewhat fan service. I'm not gonna lie, because there's I'll run questionnaires or do question and answer segments on Instagram to see what people would like to learn how to cook, or what recipes they'd love to be able to have at home, but my renditions of. And people will give me input all the time, and that's where the apron battle tacos came. People were requesting, "Oh man, I'd love to make those tacos. You know, they just look so good on TV." And so on Cinco de Mayo, I released the recipe. And so it's just something that people can kind of go to and say, "Oh, well, he actually does, you know, care about, you know, what our interests are and why we're following him." And you know, I care a lot about my followers. You know, I wouldn't be in any position to move the way that I do without my followers. So I like to be able to try to give back to them in one way or another. So that's predominantly what it's used for. Yeah.
I think it's cool how on a few of the recipes I looked at, it seems like you're showcasing a bit of your own personal interest too. For example, the watermelon mojito, I believe, was, you mentioned somebody maybe you're doing collaborations with. And I also liked how you made the lemon pepper wet wings inspired by Donald Glover and Atlanta on FX. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, that's yeah. Because to me, I like to. If people are going to follow me, I want to show them more of who I am, not just what they've seen on TV. Yeah. So for me, when I get in the kitchen, sometimes I get inspired by what I see. So if I'm watching a TV show, I'm like, "Ooh, that looks good. I'm going to try to make that." You know, and it could be anything from like Atlanta to even like an anime or something like that I think just looks really good, and I'd love to be able to bring it to life. So yeah, that was one of them, and I watched the scene that he just kept saying, you know, "Hey, these are those lemon pepper joints, but they got the sauce on them." And I was like, yo, that would be a funny post. I think people would like that one.
I liked it a lot. That's funny that you mentioned the anime too. That just reminded me, I remember watching, I think it was a Hayao Miyazaki short film, and there's a young girl and she goes camping and she takes, I think it's called onigiri, which is like the triangular shaped stuffed rice balls. And I remember seeing that in a cartoon and being like, I need to eat that in real life. I need to eat that, and I need to make that for myself. It's cool seeing influences from what you watch, and I like how you personalize your recipes on your blog that way too.
I appreciate it.
I also saw something on your blog that I haven't really seen ever anywhere else, where on the blog itself, it says, this is a 2-minute read, which is super interesting. And it's a great way to say, you're scrolling through and you're like, oh, I have 2 minutes. I could read that. That's not that simple. And it makes the recipe so much easier for someone like me, who's more than a novice, to be like, oh, if that's a 2-minute read, it's an approachable way for me to look at that cooking. So I thought that was really cool.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Did you come up with that idea?
No, it's based off of the length of the recipe.
Okay.
So a lot of the time, if you look up a recipe, typically it'll have like pretty much a short story before the recipe. You're having at least 2 pages almost of background or opinions. And personally, like, unless I'm following that blog, I'm not reading that. And I hate to admit it, but I don't have the time. Like you said, if I'm looking for a recipe, like a 2-minute read is like, yeah, okay, cool. That's doable. So for me, I didn't want to bar people down with that. So I'll give a quick summary of the recipe and then jump into the recipe with a picture of what the end product should be. I feel like that's a lot easier for people to just be able to grab and go.
Oh, it's totally, and it's so much more approachable. If I saw that and it was like, this recipe is going to take 25 minutes to read, I'm like, 25 minutes, that's going to take like 6 days for me to make. I have no time for that. No way is that happening. So I thought that was really interesting. And I know that in your local area, Oklahoma City means a lot to you from a personal side. I know you give back in a philanthropic way. So could you give us a little bit of insight into Love Works?
Oh, yeah. So Love Works Leadership is kind of an after-school program for youth in Norman, Oklahoma, and they help really cultivate interest in youth and people that, kids that may or may not be at risk, but they really help inspire kids in a way that allows them to see what they want to do for their future, or gives them the opportunity to really, spread their wings and show people that, a younger generation or people at a younger age are, meant to be taken seriously. They're still able to contribute to society. These kids are so brilliant. They have made this like virtual, what do you want to call it? Like an app, and it's called Wrist World. And they got these wristbands into one of the largest gas station chains in Oklahoma City. And you buy the wristbands only about $5, and the money goes back into the program. And you download the app, and it's a virtual world building app from the wristband. And it's, young preteens to teenagers that's come up with this. There's no way, even as a 23-year-old, I could code. So I think that's just incredible. And, they have a culinary program, and they have wood shop. And I mean, it's an amazing, amazing after school program. The founder, Michael Hirsch, is an amazing guy, great energy, really cares about being able to cultivate that. And he actually reached out to me via Twitter, I think a little bit before the show ended, and asked me if I wanted to be a part of the fundraiser, one of the fundraisers they were doing called Box City, where these kids will actually build and style these boxes, and they'll sleep outside for a night to know what it's like for homeless individuals to have to sleep outside in cardboard boxes. So it makes them more empathetic and, gets a better sense of what's going on. But I actually got to cook for these kids, and he's like, hey, can you make something that, they can relate to, and something that's a staple after school snack. And we ended up doing this ramen dish, which was pretty fun and creative, but the kids are just so brilliant that there's no way I wouldn't want to be a part of being able to help that out.
That's such a cool organization, and the perspective that they get from sleeping outside is something that I've never even heard of. That's wild. It's a great way to show them, like, stay in the program, work hard, drive towards a goal, create an app with your friends. I'm sure that I would love to be a fly on the wall in that meeting, because kids' creativity and the raw ability for them to just get together and just come up with that idea must have been amazing to watch.
Yeah, like I couldn't fathom it. They have they had a fundraiser that they were doing every year called the Pitch Dinner, and they would sell seats like any banquet would. They would sell seats to tables or sell the whole table and get people to help raise money for the program. But these kids would develop a pitch to build a new room inside of the facility, and they get $5,000, and they literally have to break down and budget it and see how the money would be spent and present it and convince these investors that they should get their money. And then they have a panel of judges. And one year I did judge for it, and then one year I cooked for it. And typically it's about 100 to 125 people that show up to help support. And these kids are incredible. Like it's almost like you're on Shark Tank. These kids will give you the whole, they'll give you the whole rundown.
That is so cool.
I love it.
So what's next for you? Obviously, in our pre-call, we talked about going down to New Orleans. Clearly, the current state of affairs in the world is not really conducive for traveling and or starting in a restaurant.
Very true. So I was recently in contact with Chef Rone's people and kind of gave them the rundown of the situation. Obviously, they are very aware of the current climate, and said, yeah, we'll still keep in contact to see what we can do to formulate a plan to get you down here. So that's still on the back burner. I've had a lot of questions about that. So just so people are aware, I do still fully intend to take Chef Rone up on his offer. It's just been a lot of roadblocks. But as far as what the future is looking at right now, I'm actually currently working with Loveworks to flip a celebrity dinner that I wanted to put together with about 4 or 5 of my other MasterChef cohorts to help raise money for these kids. Instead of the pitch dinner, we were going to do a celebrity MasterChef cook-off.
Oh, cool.
And we're going to do a couple of dishes and maybe have the kids help out on it or whatever, and bring together a couple of local larger companies to help raise money and sponsor. So now we're trying to figure out how to pivot and transform this into a virtual event and, deliver at-home meal kits and maybe do like a cooking class or something like that to help raise money for them. So that's my current project that I'm trying to work on. And from there, it's just going to be kind of cooking, working on more recipes, and kind of just interacting with my fans is kind of where I'm at right now.
I mean, at Loveworks Way, you could do that over Zoom like we're on today. And honestly, the people might get a little bit more out of it, because if you gave them the raw ingredients, they could cook with you. It could be like a master class. That would be, I think that is an awesome experience. And you might get a different group of people to join it, but maybe even expand your ability outside of the Oklahoma City area.
Most definitely. We have one other thing that I'm working on. I don't know if it's still going to be active based on, how many cases are starting to rise in different states and how many states are having an insane amount of COVID cases as of late. But I was offered to join this food festival, and it's a chef from every state that uses their state dish and they do a twist on it. So my twist, I was given chicken fried steak. So I was going to do a Chipotle chicken fried steak. So optimistically, I'll be doing that in September if everything goes well. And it'll be my first actual food festival. And it's supposed to service anywhere from 800 to 1,000 people a day. So that's also on the back burner right now. So we'll see what happens with that.
Where's that festival?
I think it's Tennessee. I'm not sure. I have to verify.
That is probably one of the coolest food festival ideas I've ever heard. 50 different vendors, one from each state, taking a swing at their state food. And I love that Oklahoma state food is the chicken fried steak. So
I totally thought it was either going to be a steak or an onion burger, honestly. And it's chicken fried steak. And I'm, okay.
So Gabe, this passion of yours has brought you so many opportunities, so much success. How do you stay true to your roots and that passion of just watching your family members in the kitchen and watching with amazement and wonder?
I have a very, very supportive family, and I have a very, very humbling family. So if I make one misstep as far as I may overseason or underseason, they'll let me know, and that's one thing that I was always taught as a young kid was, hey, whatever happens in your life, stay humble and try to, treat every individual the way that you would like to be treated. Try to make sure that you are compassionate to the person that's next to you. So in my mind, to me, I'm the same person that's walking walking next to me. There's no difference, because to me, my experience is just life experience. Their experience is life experience. So there's no real ego tripping. It's not, oh, well, do you know who I am? It's like, no, I'm me, and if you freak out about it, that's cool. But I'm still that guy that worked at Chipotle a couple years ago, so there's no, there's no difference. Like I've started somewhere, and so does everyone else. So wherever I go from there is a blessing in itself, and there's no other way to really put it.
I admire that very much. I got one more question for you. What do you like to cook for yourself?
Ooh. I am not a huge like cook for myself person. So typically I will just grab like hole in the wall Chinese food. But if I'm feeling like I need to be health conscious, so like in this current climate, I'm trying to be more health conscious. So it'll be something a little bit leaner, maybe some salmon, or like a arugula salad. I love arugula and salads. So most of what I make is typically an arugula salad.
I love it too. I feel you.
I had an arugula salad for lunch, so
Hey,
you can't
the
complain
arugula
about it.
crew over here.
Yeah, man,
I'm telling you.
it's great. It's great green.
So peppery, so good.
Oh yeah.
on what Drew's saying. So on a typical day, and this can be my last question too, is on a typical day, like are you cooking like crazy meals, or is it just kind of what do you have like if you break it down, breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
If I'm breaking down breakfast, lunch, and dinner, breakfast for me is my least favorite meal of the day. I've never, for some reason, never really gravitated towards breakfast. There was like a few exceptions, like a French toast that was like a special, hey, everybody's in a good mood, we're having French toast, yay!
Mm-hmm.
But it's nothing that I really eat too much in my adult life. So it will be, maybe a protein shake in the morning, lunchtime, maybe a light pot like an arugula salad, and dinner time maybe something like a chicken breast or fillet of salmon or whatever's in the fridge, coupled with a starch, maybe some rice or like a green like wilted spinach or something like that. But it's really basic.
Yeah. So how often are you cooking at that Masterchef quality? I mean, obviously everything you're cooking is at that quality, but like that plating standard, and are you working on that, or is that just kind of when you go to work and in your the kitchen that you're renting?
No, I usually about 3 to 5 times a week. So anything that I post on Instagram is usually made either that day or the day before.
Okay.
So everything that I've posted is for, my Insta and saying, hey, this is an idea that you may not think of. This is a new representation of something that you're familiar with. This is my take on a classic. So I do that at least 3 to 5 times a week.
Wow. And that's, I mean, and then the benefit is you get to eat it, right?
Well, yeah. Well, either that or I go and drop it off to my sister and say, hey, open the door, you got food.
So take a picture and here you go, you got food.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just say, okay, well, where are the pictures? I send them to her, and then I say, I think I did a decent job. She's like, yeah, you did really good on the photos. And then she'll send them back about 10 minutes later, edited, and I'm like, oh man, those look so much better.
Well, hey man, I that was awesome, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for telling us your story. It was unbelievably interesting. I thought I knew who you were before from watching on the show, but you really opened me up. You're much more than what you perceived yourself to be. I'm blown away by who you are.
Yeah, same here, and I'll definitely be keeping up with your blog, following those recipes, and can't wait to see what you do in the future.
Man, that means a lot. I really appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't
Thanks
wait for the
your time
YouTube
today, Gabe.
channel. I want to watch you cook.
Yeah, I want to see the Masterchef in action.
Yeah.
We'll try to make it happen.